Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another AdvisorShares AlphaNooner. Today, we are very excited to be joined by Christian Angermayer, founder of Pyron Investment Group and co-founder of ATAI Life Sciences. He's at the forefront of the psychedelic medicine renaissance, and ATAI is building a platform to turn breakthrough science into next-generation mental health treatments. We're very excited to spend some time kind of talking through the general psychedelic landscape, as well as, of course, some interesting new updates on ATAI's front there. So all that said, thanks for joining us, Christian. How is your day going so far?
Thank you for having me. So far, so good. It was my mother's birthday. Yes, all good.
Happy birthday. That's very exciting. I feel like it's nice to be able to celebrate together. So that's fantastic. So again, just because it's your first time on, I think a lot of people are probably familiar with you and your work and all of that, but would just love to start with sort of that brief background on you, kind of talking through what got you interested in psychedelics and kind of your overall worldview when it comes to kind of that investing element.
Well, we just have 30 minutes. So
I know.
Very quick now. It's my psychedelics are my favorite topic, but the very quick one is I'm very proud. I think at least in the sort of medical commercial world, we were the very first one with ATAI to sort of have the idea and then execute on it to bring back psychedelics into the medical realm. That's important. I think you all know, but still mentioning it, like we don't want to. It's not like cannabis. It's not a consumer product. We want to bring those psychedelic substances back into the medical world for medically approved, FDA approved, actually to be administered with a therapist for various mental health issues like depression, anxiety, addiction. So I was one of the lucky ones because a lot of people, I think, found psychedelics over the decades because they were looking for something. I have sort of the complete other story. I had never taken anything which would be called a recreational drug. I actually come from Bavaria. This is where I'm right now. I'm visiting a friend whom I didn't tell that I'm having a Zoom. It's just almost begin. Despite growing up in Bavaria, where I'm now, I've never tried beer, never tried any alcohol, never tried a cigarette, never tried cannabis, never tried anything till, long story, but at a dinner in 2013, so 12 years ago, the guy next to me was a very famous neuroscientist, and we talked about that, like about my kind of anti-view on most recreational drugs. And he actually said, well, kind of, you're right. Look at how bad alcohol is if you look at it scientifically. But the one thing you should try is magic mushrooms. And I was like, hell no, like this is crazy. Like, again, don't forget, this was 2013. There weren't podcasts like this. There weren't no stocks, whatever. It was literally psychedelics were actually seen, which they still classified as a very bad thing. But he was very convincing. It then took me a year. He sent me all his research because research was always allowed. So research slowed down after kind of the outlawing in the 60s and 70s, but it never stopped. So he sent me his research. It was very compelling. We do in my family office at Pyron, one of our big pillars is biotech. So I was able to like read it and was like, oh, wow, this makes a lot of sense. And then again, another story for another podcast because I'm personally very spiritual. So I was in a holiday with very close friends. They had homegrown mushrooms and said, okay, we don't want to do that tomorrow, so don't look for us. And something told me, let's try it. So it was technically the first recreational drug I've ever done. And it was hands down single most meaningful, important thing in my whole life. And then I came out of the trip, 2014, and was like, wow, if it's doing this amount of sort of add-on positivity and insights, whatever, to me as a very happy, healthy person, I can totally see what studies suggest that it can help with mental health issues. And then sort of I started working on it and it finally accumulated in 2017 and starting ATAI. 2021, we IPO'd, and here we are on your podcast.
That's fantastic. Well, again, it's great to take that experience that you personally kind of went through on your own and be able to bring it to other people, again, who are dealing with mental health stuff, where I think psychedelics and psychedelic medicine can really be a big boon for them. So that's fantastic. Definitely a wild story, I think, stepping back, just not trying any alcohol, not trying any, cigarettes, cannabis, any of that, and going in full force on psychedelics. But again, I think it's taking you to a very great place and to be able to share that work, which is fantastic. Maybe let's spend a little time kind of digging into ATAI, because I know it's had a fantastic year to date so far in 2025. Would love to talk high level sort of, what's been driving that. You guys have been very busy in terms of how you're building on ATAI and building it up and kind of changing and adapting it. Can you kind of talk through those elements?
Yeah. Well, to be fair, want to say this very loud because I really know what sort of our also duty is to our shareholders. Yes, it has been a fantastic year, but the last years since the IPO were, and by the way, not just for us, it was for the entire sort of biotech sector. So why psychedelic stocks in general, and especially ATAI, is rebounding from these really low lows is because I think they have lost way too much relatively to other biotech stocks in the biotech downturn. What has happened? Let's start with the macro picture. Like we had a generational biotech boom 2020, 2021. In this boom, we IPO'd at $15 a share. And then right after, literally 6 months later, the whole inflation spike, and then a little bit later, the interest rate spike started. And biotech as a whole sector, it's not a Thai specific, is the most interest rate sensitive sector. So yes, biotech as a whole, including ATAI, was supposed, so to say, to go down when interest rates go up. But because biotech is at the end a fairly closely held sector, that let's say, I don't know, 30%, well, it was maybe warranted that biotech stocks, again, in average got down 30%. It was too much for the industry. So, and what you then actually saw that all the small and mid-cap biotech stocks, again, not just psychedelic stocks, not just the Thai, went down 80, 90% because there was just these sort of panic selling almost, and liquidity dried out and all of that. And in this macro biotech sort of bear market, what investors then do, the few remaining investors, they are like, you know what? Let me focus on the very classic stuff. Like, I don't want to explain my boss why I own psychedelic stock. Not because psychedelics have any special risk. To the contrary, I can make the pitch and say, we do know these medications work because they have been, or at least some of the medications we developed had been actually approved medications in the 50s and 60s. But just because psychedelics sound very sort of novel. Yeah. And again, in a bear market, people don't like novelty at all. They want to tell their boss, you know what, we stick with cardiovascular, we stick with oncology and whatever. So this is why within an anyway terrible segment, all the psychedelic stocks, and especially ATAI, actually lost even more sort of than the normal small mid-cap biotech, which also went down 80%. So, but having said that, the valuations, and by the way, I'm saying that with all the disclaimer, I'm the founder, I'm the chairman, I believe in nothing else. But by the way, I did put in 22.75 million US cash, like not like something free stock round or whatever. No, I invested like anybody else in a capital raise. Yeah. And by that increased my stake because I believe so much in it. So it's all biased what I'm telling you because I'm the founder and chairman, but at least I put my money where my mouth is. So I think these valuations, especially at ATAI, is ridiculous. Yeah, because we have more than 5 late stage. We're not talking about early stage. Oh my God, maybe in 7 years something is happening. We have more than 5 late stage mental health drugs. Unfortunately, mental health is the number one problem of patients of the healthcare system. So we have more than 5 drugs, which potentially, but already very late stage in its sort of approval cycle, can solve the mental health crisis. I think I can say, yeah, with conviction, but also like with fundamental sort of, how you say, support, a single mental health drug, which is able to cure or even just in average make patients with depression, anxiety, addiction, whatever, much better. A single drug is worth several billions once approved. You just need to have one look at Spravato, which is now a multi-billion best-selling drug. And we have more than 5 of those. Yeah. So the valuation, in my point of view, doesn't make sense. And the market is starting to realize that. And that's why we're rebounding. Additionally, I think people hopefully get like how excited I am. Yeah. What is great is that the current administration in the US is outspoken positive. I want to say, though, they always were, especially, and for us, it's not a political decision. For us, important is that the FDA has always been super supportive. But the few of the investors was sometimes, they sort of, so far nobody publicly said something. They were great to us and to others, but like they didn't make statements. So it's very helpful now, although it's just showing what the FDA has always been. Wow, they are very supportive. They want this to happen. We just need to execute. and sort of deliver the clinical trials in a proper gold standard form. And I think that's what we're doing.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. And in terms of what you were saying, in terms of biotech, how it was performing, as well as the psychedelic segment of biotech, I do think that there's something to be said, like you're saying, where as a lot of these trials are actually getting closer to their end stages, as we're seeing the FDA commissioner, make these public statements, as we're just seeing kind of acceptance kind of come around, I think there's been a lot of change in the past 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. I think even in that relatively short amount of time, I know there's been a resurgence in interest in psychedelics. I think there's a higher level of comfort more broadly, which has been fantastic and something very exciting for people to look for, again, from an investment perspective. Um, would love to talk about, again, I think it's great that you've been putting in more investment into psychedelics. I can definitely see why. I also know that for ATAI, you've been doing some interesting stuff in terms of adding kind of Bitcoin to the treasury. I know you also have an interest in kind of the crypto element in your own life and interest. How did that kind of tie in together? And, what can you kind of talk through on that front?
Yes. So there's a very sort of, let's say, economic tie, and then there is more a philosophical tie. By the way, as a shameless self-promotion, yeah, I love to talk about that. As you see, I love to be on these podcasts, and I also blog a lot because I really want people to understand why we're doing things. And I wrote several blog posts, and they either you can find me on LinkedIn under my name, which you see spelled out here, yeah, or I have a Substack. Just Google my name and my Substack, and I talked about exactly that. Why did I put in more money? Yeah, and also the question I'm answering now. So the Bitcoin one. The one is the sort of, let's call it the just banal economic one. Biotech companies always are supposed to at least have a surplus of cash, and we have more than 100 million at the moment. I think it's approximately 140 at the moment. Why? Because we're spending them over the years on clinical trials. But prudent biotech companies always have enough money. So, for example, ATAI has runway into 2027, this year and next year, and then early 2027. And so, I personally believe, but I think also that's kind of a little bit of common sense. If you look at the spending orgy, the current U.S. government is just about to kick off again. All of that is that we sort of the value of fiat cash, for example, US dollar, over the years would rather go down compared to hard asset stores of value like Bitcoin. So what I want to make clear, because I guess that some people know that, there are crypto treasury companies like MicroStrategy or 21, whatever, they only buy Bitcoin. We're not that. I made this in my blog post very clear. We are a biotech company. I want to be a biotech company. I'm very passionate about what we're doing, but I do believe that sort of having a certain amount of our cash in Bitcoin is actually a prudent decision, like we sometimes have euro and US dollar, yeah, so a normal company. So why not add sort of a third option, which I believe is a very sound one. That's the economic one. There is a little bit of a philosophical one, which goes through our entire also APIRON portfolio. I'm personally a very libertarian sort of person. This is how I see the life. We should have as little government. We have way too much of it and all of that. And so I believe in freedom. And if you look at what Bitcoin does, it gives people freedom of kind of the otherwise inevitable degradation and sort of decay of their respective currency. And I always say, if you think about psychedelics in a more philosophical way, one of the reasons, and now I speak in Christian as a person, not as a chairman, because it's a non-scientific answer, but I think one of the big things psychedelic do, they help you master your ego. Yeah, and most people, without actually realizing that, sometimes they believe the ego, so their sense of self, is the only thing they have, and or they are actually enslaved by it, because that ego is driving a lot of fears, a lot of insecurities, and all of that. And one sort of, again, very non-medical answer now from Christian privately, when people do psychedelic trips, including myself, you realize, wait, there is something more. So some people would call it, we have a soul. Some people who don't want to use a religious word would say, oh, there is at least a subconsciousness I haven't explored, but there is more to me than my sort of day-to-day ego, because that part of the brain where this ego, the sense of self, is created, is regulated down under a psychedelic trip. And I always tell people, because the normal question is the number one thing when I talk about psychedelics, people are like, oh, I'm never going to try it because I'm afraid of losing control. And my answer is always like, no, you don't at all. You actually gain control about your ego, and having control and the mastery of your ego will make you actually a much more freer person than you would have been without it.
I definitely agree. It feels like it's a kind of a way to unlock yourself ultimately, but I do think it is something to be a little bit more caution, when you're comparing to something like cannabis in terms of misusing cannabis. The worst thing that really happens is you take a really long nap and, you kind of sink into the couch versus, misusing psychedelics. I think it can be a really strong, impactful tool, but kind of using it the wrong way can create, negative experiences. So I guess it's having ultimately, like in ATAI's sense, a really regulated and kind of controlled
100%. That's why I'm always saying what we're doing is not only doing all the FDA studies to bring these therapeutics back, but we're focusing on, and we're actually, that's sort of the class of medication we're applying for. These are substances which have to be taken with a therapist, so they won't be on prescription. So it's not that when they're approved, you can pick them up in your pharmacy and go home and do it, because indeed, as you say, especially when people do it for medical reasons, I don't like the word bad trip or negative trip, because if the trip is managed well with your therapist, then often the sort of harder ones are the ones where people really learn about themselves, because sometimes, unfortunately, the underlying reason, for example, for a mental health issue can be a trauma, and sometimes the only way to sort of overcome it is to face it. So, but that is then often, especially trauma sort of dissolution trips are very, in the moment, very exhausting and very challenging. But that's why we're so insistent that, again, a therapist has to be present, while the patient is doing the session.
Yeah, I think that's an important differentiating factor. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't have to be all easy and you're seeing very, very nice things or feeling good the entire time. You can work through
Can
that
be,
stuff,
but
just
it
like
depends. And again, my Christian non-scientist answer is, I do believe that your subconsciousness or your soul or whatever you want to call it brings actually up exactly that trip, what you need in this very moment to find cure for whatever your problem is.
Yeah, again, I think that's one of the reasons that it's so impressive and impactful. It is really able to, is it hard basically talking to people who or haven't really had much experience, trying to kind of convey and explain either what it's like for you to have had one, or what the medicine can do from even an investment perspective as well as a treatment perspective, just because I think on the face of it, it does seem so, it's not obviously a silver bullet, but it does seem to have such an impressive impact that's so positive, and really be able to take a lot out of a person in a very positive way. Is it difficult to articulate that and really kind of bring somebody to understanding whether, again, they're an investor or they're somebody who's considering kind of using it?
Yeah. So, by the way, as you said, nothing is a silver bullet. But what the data suggests, by the way, because again, the good thing is we're now, and by the way, that's maybe one reason I forgot why ATAI especially is running up. We're gearing up for two very big data releases. So Compass Pathways, which is a separate company listed, but we still have a strategic stake, and Compass used to be kind of a spin out of ATAI, will release their phase 3 data of their first arm. I think the guidance is somewhere mid-year. And ATAI will release data for 5-MeO-DMT, which we just completely absorbed because we merged with Beckley, which is the sort of company which has 5-MeO, where we so far just had a 35% stake, and we just merged. So we own now 100% of Beckley. Is also guided for data release mid-year, so phase 2B. But what do I say? Everything we're saying is not just an assumption or a belief. Like, this is hardcore data. And the data is really unbelievable good, especially compared to current treatment options in mental health, which are just awful. Yeah, most of them. Yeah, with very little upsides and a lot of downsides. And the data for psychedelic suggests, yes, there is always a little bit of downside, but the suggestion is there is not a really bad one. But sort of the success rate is enormous. And sorry, last point, which I always try to explain people, and then I come to your question, is different than some other drugs. I think the trial data, that's my personal belief, again, and we're going to see that then hopefully after approval, that the trial data is kind of the worst case outcome. because it's very, very standardized, which it, by the way, has to be, because that's the gold standard, FDA, you do double-blinded, very, very standardized stuff. But like, I do believe that once psychedelics are approved, when the therapist can customize the therapy more and maybe even say, oh, for you, patient one, I think the right thing to do is psilocybin, while for patient two, I would go for DMT. And I think that's a little bit the feeling therapists will develop, like, by the way, doctors do it. Like when they look at people with, I don't know, XYZ, a cardiologist would say, you look, for you, I have better experience with this one and whatever. So I think the real life success rate of these medications will be even higher than we're seeing now. And what we're seeing now in the very sort of randomized double-blind studies is amazing. So to your question, it's not good, it's really amazing. But to your question is, the world has really changed. Like when we started 2017, really people were like, look, you're crazy. And not, they did not mean it in a nice way. Like there's the good crazy. Back then they meant it not nice. And they're not nice, but like most of my friends were like, look, you're known for sort of doing a little bit like the daring stuff, but that's too much. So the only reason, by the way, why ATAI did work out in Compass was that at the beginning, I was able, because I have my own family office, I started 27 years ago actually in biotech, I was able to put in all the money at the beginning with very few friends just supporting me because they trusted me, namely Mike Novogratz, the CEO of Galaxy. So big shout out to him. He always believed in it. And Peter Thiel. So these were my two very, very first outside investors. The rest of the money had to come from me. So then this all changed in 2019-20, when biotech boom was there. But then also like, not just because the macro environment was great for biotech, but there was also this moment, and it's very hard to say why, hopefully a little bit because of our work. There's a guy I adore like Michael Pollan. He wrote an amazing book, How to Change Your Mind. By the way, everybody here who's listening and wants to know more about the science, why psychedelics do what they do, this book, How to Change Your Mind, from Michael Pollan, is amazing. So there were many things which happened, which suddenly kind of changed the view of society on it. And now even 5 years later, it's kind of positively almost an accepted fact. So people sitting there and are just waiting for us to deliver, which is, by the way, another reason why I think ATAI is so undervalued, because some analysts and investors who look at ATAI, they go back to a drug called Spravato, which is esketamine, which is not a psychedelic, but it's kind of, I would say, psychedelic light or psychedelic-ish, from Johnson & Johnson. And when they came to the market in 2019, they had a very slow start because that was a different time. It was also then COVID. They didn't know how to really like sort of sell it to the therapists, whatever. So, and a lot of analysts and investors are looking at that and saying, we totally believe you're going to get approval. By the way, that's, I feel, nobody's really doubting, but it's going to take you also, like it took Johnson & Johnson, it's going to take you 3-4 years to make meaningful revenues. And I'm like, look, you get it totally wrong for 3 reasons. The one is like, the world has changed. Like, we're having this conversation. And by the way, everywhere I am, if I go for dinner with a head of state or with an investor, they want to talk about psychedelics, even in the Middle East, for example, which is crazy. Like, and they are like really positive about it. But second, also named Spravato, they now made all the sort of the necessary infrastructure investments. So all the therapists know it because Spravato also, as it's psychedelic-like, takes 2 hours from start to finish. Most of the ATAI psychedelics we're focusing on, namely DMT and 5-MeO-DMT, fit into these 2-hour, what we call a treatment window. So we actually coming to market into like, in Germany, they're made bad because like, so all the groundwork has been done. Shout out to Johnson & Johnson. We love you. Thanks for doing the work. And now we're coming with much better, even better solutions.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So do you think ultimately we've turned a corner, and again, that momentum is only going to continue to compound and really open up things for psychedelic medicine in general? ATAI, ultimately, yes, it sounds like.
Yes, 100%. Look, it's like, I guess that's why I put in the money again. Like, but like also like for the patients, I'm very, very happy. This is happening, as we know. The regulators want it. As long as we deliver, again, it's all an execution question. Politics wants it, but also especially the patients want it. I meet so many people. I meet therapists, by the way, who eagerly sitting there and are just waiting for us to be successful, because like it's kind of an accepted fact. And that makes me so excited, because that means once we're successful meaning once we've delivered the data, I think the rollout and sort of the acceptance will be super quick, fast, and strong.
That's fantastic. Okay, so again, I know you've touched on some of the exciting things that ATAI has done, again, including the kind of Beckley acquisition, which is fantastic. But just sort of looking ahead, what else should people be keeping an eye on from an investor perspective as we head into the second half of 2025 and beyond, kind of from ATAI and maybe from the space?
Yeah. Well, definitely, as I said, the readout, or the readouts, like ATAI will come mid-year with 5-MeO DMT phase 2b readout. I think it's going to be a very defining moment for ATAI in the sector, and Compass sort of around the same time will come out with their phase 3 readout for the first phase 3 study. Yeah, these are the two most important things happening this year, I would say, for the entire psychedelic space, and obviously especially for ATAI and Compass. And again, just follow me on Twitter, whatever, and you're the first one to know.
That sounds good. Yeah, I'll definitely send around. I'll include your handle just so people can follow along, and also your Substack. So I do think the Substack is really helpful in terms of breaking down kind of your perspective, what you're seeing, kind of from a larger view. So that's fantastic. All right, Christian, I know it's been kind of a quick check-in, but I think very, very helpful and very insightful. I know there's been a lot of attention and activity around investments around psychedelic medicine, and it does, like you're saying, feel like a good time to at least be taking a look and really considering that. So I think that's fantastic. Thanks so much. I'll let you enjoy the rest of your trip. Thanks for making the time. I know, again, you're in the middle of a trip, so really, really appreciate it, especially.
And by the way, happy to do it like some days after the phase 2b readout from Beckley, 5-MeO DMT or Compass, whatever. We can check in actually, because so much is happening. So very happy
to. I would love to work through that. Again, someone who's able to kind of break it down and really explain why it's impactful. I think you can see it by reading it, but it helps to have someone kind of walk along through. So really, really appreciate it again. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. Really appreciate you being here. And
thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody, for being interested in what we're doing.
Yeah, that sounds good. All right. Thanks so much. We'll see you soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at AdvisorShares.com.